Hello, Foxy Finds here, and welcome back to Foxy Shiny Quest. This week, we're going to cover Pokemon that were either introduced or were the main focus of an episode that was banned or unaired for the anime series, at least in the United States. I'll be going over the Pokemon, what the episode was about, and what it was banned or unaired for. First up, we have Tentacool. This Pokemon was notorious in the first game because you had this large section of ocean that you had to traverse, and for a good chunk of that, Tentacool was the only encounter you had. That or random trainers. Unlike most locations, the levels in these routes varied significantly, ranging from 5 all the way up to 40. And I'll tell you, these Pokemon are so common, I found 2 other shiny Tentacool. I evolved one of these spare ones up to Tentacruel. It is said that Tentacruel have 80 tentacles, though it usually only has about 14 of them out at a time. At some point in development, this Pokemon was going to be called Man-O-War, referencing the real-life Portuguese man-o-war, a siphonophore that resembles a jellyfish and can be found in the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. They have a sting that can be deadly to humans and is quite painful. Following this up, I found Horsey. These Pokemon can shoot ink out of their mouths for some strange reason. They do this when they want to flee into murky water. In the anime, it was shown that this is able to be used to convey messages. And in case you couldn't tell, its name is just the reverse syllables of seahorse. These Pokemon were introduced in the aptly named episode Tentacool and Tentacruel. The plot of the episode is that a coral reef is going to be destroyed to build a luxurious hotel. This coral reef is the home of Tentacool and Tentacruel, and it's very important to them. Misty manages to catch a Horsey that was injured and warns of the angered Tentacool. As things develop, one of the Tentacool ends up evolving into a gigantic Tentacruel, and they proceed to attack the city. Misty is able to calm down the Tentacool and Tentacruel and prevent the rest of the city's destruction. In this episode, there is a scene where Tentacruel destroys a tower. Shortly after the World Trade Center attacks in New York City, this was removed and completely taken out of rotation by WB. It re-aired when Cartoon Network started airing Pokemon again. Ironically, the scene in question had never been removed from the intro song. So this scene that got this episode banned was visible in almost every episode up until when they changed the intro. 4 years later, this episode was once again temporarily banned after Hurricane Katrina hit the southeastern United States. This was due to this episode also depicting the city being completely flooded, though it was only for a short time. The episode went back into circulation not too long after. This is the only episode on this list that managed to get banned twice. Next up, I found a Ghastly, which I promptly evolved up into Haunter. Haunter is prone to lick its victims, which will cause them to uncontrollably shake. In the anime, they are shown as playful when they're not trying to terrify people. I was lucky enough to find a second Ghastly, and this time it was in a game that was easy to evolve it up all the way to Gengar. This Pokemon can hide in people's shadows. The Pokemon world is honestly a little bit vague about what this Pokemon does or its intentions, but it does imply that Gengar are pretty dangerous. These Pokemon were introduced in an episode called The Tower of Terror. Ash is attempting to catch a Ghost-type Pokemon to counter a strong Psychic-type foe. Ash encounters a Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar, and is scared at first, but ends up finding that these Pokemon just want to play. He befriends them and gets the assistance of a Haunter for his next fight. This is the only episode to have never had an actual explanation as to why it was banned. Seeing as it also occurred after the Trade Center attack, it is assumed because the title is about a tower, though it doesn't really have any other connection. Personally, I would have guessed that it would have been maybe that they pulled Ash and Pikachu's souls out of their body, but they do put them back, so that's definitely child appropriate. This episode returned into circulation extremely quickly. On to a fairly rare Pokemon, Dratini. In Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, you had to go to the Safari Zone and fish for these, and that you could actually catch them. With a somewhat low encounter rate and a low catch rate, getting these Pokemon normally was quite a hunt. You could alternatively buy one from the Rocket Game Corner if you had enough coins, but that usually isn't worth it. Even after obtaining one of these, you then had to evolve it up, which is a chore in and of itself since they evolve at a pretty high level. Its moveset wasn't too bad though. Slam was pretty strong and you could use agility to increase its crit chance. Also, Wrap was downright broken, and you could pair that with Thunder Wave to make it even easier to get them trapped within a wrap. I managed to catch myself a second Dratini and promptly evolved it up into Dragonair. These Pokemon are able to control the weather, and they can fly with those ear wings. Honestly, I really love that the pearl-like orbs on its neck and its tail turn gold and in shiny form. It really makes them stand out. Ever wonder why Ash never went to the Safari Zone himself? And how he also managed to catch 30 tourists off-screen? Well, I have the band episode that will explain these and more. This episode was never dubbed, so we don't have an English name, but its Japanese name roughly translates to The Legend of Dratini. This episode has Ash arrive at the Safari Zone. He is given a bunch of Safari balls to catch Pokemon with, and Team Rocket challenges him to a competition to see who can catch the most Pokemon. Though, their real target is the rumored Dratini. One of the important gags of this episode is Ash tries to catch a Pokemon, a bunch of tourists run in the way, and he catches one instead. It's implied that this happens a few times, and all he was able to catch was Taurus. Team Rocket, on the other hand, was able to find Dratini, but they were unable to capture it. Team Rocket goes to the extent of taking a bomb to throw into a lake to catch all the Pokemon from it, hoping to get the Dratini that resides within it. Ash manages to stop them with the help of a Dragonair who is protecting its child, Dratini. All of this honestly sounds like a fairly typical Pokemon episode, so why was it banned? The answer is that this episode had several instances of guns being used to threaten Ash and company, and even being shot at Team Rocket. This was to the point of guns being put directly in people's faces, including Ash. This was seen as far too realistic of a weapon to be depicting in this way, so this episode never made it to the English audience. Finally, we have the last Pokemon, Whiscash. Whiscash seems to be quite the troublesome Pokemon in the anime, with its first appearance being a particularly large one that a man is trying to capture, and he's been trying to catch for a very, very long time. It's to the point that he gets himself a Master Ball to ensure he can catch this, and somehow Whiscash just swallows it. There's no explanation as to why this works, but anime logic, I suppose. These Pokemon are based off of catfish and therefore have a groundwater type, as many catfish like to dwell in the mud at the bottom of a riverbed. This Pokemon also was an antagonist again in the very first episode to never be aired anywhere in the world. The short explanation is that a group of Whiscash are causing earthquakes, and Ash and company meet a kid who wants to try to stop them by training up his own Pokemon. As for the long explanation, we don't know. Very little is known about this episode. What we do know is why it was banned. A few days before this episode aired, 15 earthquakes hit Japan over the course of 5 days. Since this episode's entire plot was based around earthquakes, the episode ended up being skipped, and it never aired in the first place, never was released, never had a dub, none of that. That is all I have for today, but I do want to point out, I caught Porygon in a much earlier episode this year, and it would be a shame to not bring that up here. The episode that would have introduced Porygon only aired once, and it became the catalyst for all those seizure and flashing light warnings that you see before games and movies and videos on YouTube even. Go ahead and watch this episode here if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. And no, I did not show anything that requires a flashing light warning in that episode. I hope you all enjoyed looking a little bit deeper into these banned and unaired episodes. There were a few others that I didn't get to because I didn't manage to catch the Pokemon around the episodes. But if we catch them, we'll definitely go over those. If you have a Pokemon or theme that you'd like me to go over other than this, let me know in the comments and I will see what I can do. As for now, I will wish you all a wonderful week, and as always, happy hunting.